Beautiful. Okay, Bezos Hashem, today's daf is daf Chav Ches. It's a small daf, but we're still a little behind, so we're daf Chav Ches on the base. The Mishnah begins, Noshim ba Moed ma'anois, avaloi metapchois. We're going back to Moed. If there's a levaya on Moed, so they used to have women, specialized women, hired for the occasion, to get the crowd emotional. So on Moed, ma'anois, these women are permitted to do ma'anois. I'll tell you what that means. This means to get the crowd into it, saying, words, depressing words at the same time. But they're not. We don't permit banging of the hands. Hi, Steve. We just began. We're on Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis by the Mishnah.
Okie dokie.
Okay, says the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael says, "Hasamuchas lemita metapchais." Those women that are very close to the bed, and it means they're very close to the coffin, they are permitted on Chalamoid to clap their hands. I guess it was like a beat or something like that, certain type of beat to bring out emotions. But the Tanakama holds you're not allowed to do that on Chalamoid. Rosh Chodashim b'Chanukah b'Purim. On Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Purim, we also have to minimize the way funerals are done. So ma'anois and metapchos, you're allowed to do this ma'anois, and the metapchos means clapping of the hand. Bezeh bezeh, but both Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh, and Purim loy mekoinen nois. You don't do koinen nois. Koinen nois means, we'll see in the Mishnah. Mishnah is going to explain that one woman says something and everybody repeats after her. For some reason, that's the most strictest of all the stuff that you do at a funeral, and that's not permitted on Chalamoid, and not even on Rosh Chodesh and Chanukah and Purim. Nikba hameis, even on Chalamoid, loy ma'anis, loy metapos. You're not allowed to do anis, and you're not allowed to do metapos. Now the Mishnah explains itself. What is ezehu inoi? What was inoi? So the Mishnah says shakulan oinen ka'achas. Everybody in unison would say some hesped words or some famous poems. Maybe they would recite a poem all at once. Kina, what was a kina? Sha'achas medaberes. One woman would say the phrase or the song out loud. V'kulan oines achreha, and they all would respond. Maybe they would say the chorus. She would keep saying like a poem. Shenema v'lamedna b'naisechem nehi v'ishru usakina, and that you teach the woman's nehi v'isha ru'usa. One woman will teach her friend kina, how to do kina. So we see kina is one saying and the other one responding. The bottom line here is that you can't. You have to be make a funeral very respectful, and getting the people emotional is a very important part of the funeral, and especially as we're learning in the Gemara how to prepare a speech for your funeral. But the Mishnah doesn't want to end off in a depressing part in Masechta Moed Katan, the last Masechta. According to some, this was the last Masechta in Moed. So Avala Asalave, in the future, there's no more death. The pasuk says, Bila Hamava Lenetzach. Death will be gone forever. The Eibishter will erase tears, me'al kol panim, from all the faces. Okay, Hashem dima elkim dima me'al kol panim. Zok the Gemara. My Omran. What would they say at a levaya? So Omar Rav, vai la'ozla, vai la'chavila. They would say, vai la'ozla, woe is to the person that's gone, and vai la'chavila, woe is to the person that had this deposit by him. When you have a soul, it's deposited by you. It's like a mashkin, and you have to take care of it and watch it. So that's what they would say by a levaya. Amar Rava said, Nashei de Shachansev. They were specialized women of the Shachansev. Amran Hachi. They would say the same thing. Vai la'ozla, vai la'chavila. The Amar Rava says, Nashei de Shachansev, the women of Shachansev. There's a bunch of statements that Rava is going to repeat what he heard by funerals he attended in Shachansev, and these women had these phrases that were so powerful and emotional that Rava repeated it into the Gemara. He said the women used to say, "Goid garme mikava v'nimte ma'ila antuche." Basically, the teeth is removed from his jawbone is removed, and the water gets returned to the bucket. In other words, when a person dies, now you have to rewind the movie, so to speak. When water normally gets poured into a cup, and from the cup it's poured into the mouth. But now a person dies, everything goes back in reverse as you start reviewing a person's life. Rava says, let the mountains be covered with a nice cloak, because a great person and an elevated person just passed. So that was their expression. Then Rava said, in the Shei de Shechansiv Amra, the women of Shechansiv used to say, by a particular person, which happened that he was once rich, and then he became poor. Like that's a very bad thing. When somebody was once rich and then becomes poor, it's a very hard life. So they would say, Shayule itztalo de melsa. It's like a beautiful wool coat. Lebar chorim, it's better than a beautiful wool coat for someone who's free. The shlim is vode that he can afford to pay for his tachrichin. In other words, as Rashi explains, that somebody it's better for him to die than to continue on living and suffering in hunger, because he can't afford to pay anymore like he used to. This expression, ani choshev kames, they say ani choshev, if a person was once a choshev a person, and then he becomes poor, he's like a mace, like a dead person. V'yama Rava says, Neshedish chansiv amram, rohit v'nafel abavra v'yizaisva yazef. A person runs all his life for money, and then when it comes to his death, he has to borrow for the funeral. So that's also an expression of how life goes. V'yama Rava says, Neshedish chansiv amra, achara dikare azavge mibadke. Achana tagore azavde mibadke. The basically the people who are in business go to the main office to be checked to see if they're doing business honestly. So again, we're all doing business on this world, but there will come a time where we'll have to report back to headquarters to see how well we did. V'yama Rava says, Nesheish Chansav Amram, Moisa ki Moisa. Everybody dies. Basically, that's what they would say. Everybody dies. Umaran chibulaya. But what makes a person die differently, some people suffer before they die, is because they have to pay interest on how they conducted their life, so to speak. And therefore, certain things need to be paid back prior to you returning your soul. So again, all this stuff teaches you that an alavaya, not only you're supposed to cause the people to cry, but you're supposed to also move the crowd to get them to do tshuva and to take life seriously. That's the essence of a lavaya, and that's why the Gemara brings this. Tanya, we learned to the Brisa. Rameir used to say, Toiv lelechas al beisavel. It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of wedding. A person who's still alive should take it to heart. What does that mean? Devarim shel misa. If you take the attendance of attending a funeral, you got to take that to heart. In other words, the yisped yispedinei. If you give a eulogy for someone, they're going to give you a nice eulogy. That means you have to prepare for eulogy, and sometimes in life, and you say, what do I need to do it? I'll hire the rabbi to do it. Well, the rabbi never knew the person. So why should I be bothered with it? If you put the effort to mimaspit somebody, they're going to show you honor when you pass on to give you a nice husband. The yikbar, if you take the time to go to the cemetery to help bury somebody, yikbireinu, they're going to bury you. The yitam, yitanune. The yitan means if you carry, then they will carry you. The yedel yidlune. If you cause other people to raise their voices because you prepared such a nice emotional speech, yidlune, they're going to be emotional by your speech. So basically, what he's saying is that some people go to a levaya just to show their face, and then they're back on the phone and business as usual. But you have to recognize that if you take the time and shut the phone off and you attend the funeral, and if you're involved in preparing for the funeral, you prepared a nice speech. You not only should take it to heart, says Rameir, that you do that to people, God will make sure that it's done to you. Ikadi Amri, others say that this last part means he's teaching you the law yidal. If you don't haughty yourself, yidlune, then people will lift you. If you're humble, people will lift you. Diksiv kitoiv amalach aleihena. It's better if they tell you, come up here. Imagine you're on the dais, and they tell you, if you're not on the dais, and they say, come up to the dais. That's a nicer statement than if you're on the dais and they tell you, no, you don't. You're sitting in the wrong seat. You're supposed to sit in the crowd. Tanu Rabbanim, the rabbis taught a story. Kishamei Subanav Shel Rabbi Yishmael, when the sons of Rabbi Yishmael died, and they died all at once, one after another. Nichnasu Daled Zakein Lanachamai. 4 great Tanoim came to give him comfort. Rab Tarfon, Rab Yossi, Rab Lozim Razai, Rabbi Akiva. Amalehem Rab Tarfon said, he came to Menachem Avel, Rabbi Shmuel. He gave the guys a pep talk. Recognize, he's very intelligent. Uvoki ba'agodis, and he's familiar with all the agodis of Shas. Ali konas echad el divrei chaverei. Ali konas echad mehem l'soich divrei chaverei. One of you should not go into what the other one is going to say. In other words, don't repeat yourself. So we'll all say different things. Rabbi Kiva says, Ani Acharon. I'm going to be the last one here. Pasuk Rabbi Shmuel began. Rabbi Shmuel, who was sitting Shiva, it's very interesting. He lost his 2 sons, and he was matzdik all of Hasadin. He's saying that God is correct. But Omar, he said, Rabbi Avonosov, I had such great sin. Techafu avelav. That's why my mourning is very severe. Hetriach Rabbi Yosef, I bothered you to come be Menachem Avel. The first time my son, one son died, Ushnia, and another son died. So once the Avel starts talking, as we're going to learn, then the Menachemim are permitted to start saying words of Nechama. You can't begin talking until the Avel himself first starts the conversation. So it says in the pasuk, the Jewish people should cry about what was burnt. So they're going to say like this: the sons of Aharon, they only did one small mitzvah. The pasuk says, they brought to the father Aharon, they helped him during the inauguration of the Mishkan by helping him out carrying the blood. Kach. They got such a great levaya that the entire Jewish people cried when they died. One of Rabbi Yishmael, the sons of Rabbi Yishmael, who did many mitzvahs, alachas kama v'kama, certainly they deserve a beautiful statements, and the whole Jewish people should cry on the loss. Now, Rabbi Yosef Galili Avama, Rabbi Yosef Galili spoke up and he said, "V'amru saftu lo'kol Yisrael v'kavro Yisrael." The entire Jewish people gave a eulogy and buried him. This is talking about a person in Tanakh who we'll learn in a moment. Let's make a kal v'chomer. Uma Avia ben Yeravam, Avia, the son of Yeravam. Yeravam ben Nevat led the civil war in the Jewish people that broke the 10 tribes from the 2 tribes. That there was 10 Shvatim and then the 2 Shvatim. And he disallowed the people moving in Shomron and in the north from coming into Yerushalayim to be Oile Regal. Totally separate walls you couldn't pass through. But his son did one thing good. He did one thing good. What did he do? The Gemara is going to explain. He did one thing good, and he's the son of this Rasha. Other than that, this Abiyah was a big Rasha. So he got when he died, this Abiyah, the son of Yerabin, he got the whole entire Klal Yisrael was crying for him. So he only did one thing good. The sons of Rabbi Shmuel did many good things in their life. Certainly, they deserve a great eulogy. My Davatov, what is the great thing that this Aviyah did? So Rab Zerab Chanina Bar Papa is a machlokes. He basically absolved, when he took over as a ruler, he absolved the people from being prohibited to go to Yerushalayim during Yom Tov time. So his father did not allow it, but when he took over, he nullified that decree. When it was his turn, when his father was alive, he he did away with the police force that prevented Jews from coming up to Regel, even before he was king. So he did one good thing, even though in other parts he probably did avodah zarah himself and all other things against the Torah. But he did one good thing, that he got this great levaya. None of Rabbi Shmuel ben Azai. I guess you get the picture of what's going on over here. That Rabbi Shmuel's sons died, and what the people are with the Tanoim who are visiting him are saying to him, look, when Tanakh you find that the great people died and they only did one good thing, and yet they got this great levaya. Certainly your children who are known for their piety did many good things. The whole Jewish people should mourn their death. So the Gemara says, Nen Rab Loza ben Azariah ba'amar. Rab Loza ben Azariah says, B'shalom Thomas v'misrufais avaisav v'rishonim asher hoylef necha came yisrufu lach. By Tzidkiyahu, the king of Yehuda, he's the last king of Yehuda, God promised you're going to die peacefully, and you're going to die like a king, that they're going to burn your items of clothing that you used like they would do for a king. The Tzidkiyahu, the king of Yehuda, he only did one mitzvah that we find in Tanakh. He may have been a tzaddik, but the Tanakh only speaks about one good thing he did. And what was the good thing that he did? He brought Yirmiyah out of the mud. In other words, they put Yirmiyah in quicksand when he was starting to spread the Megillas Eicha prior to the destruction of the temple. So people got so frustrated with Jeremiah, they took him and threw him into quicksand, and he was about to die. And Tzidkiyahu saved his life. So Tzidkiyahu saved Yirmiyah's life, and he got this great levaya that God promised him. He's going to get a phenomenal levaya. Certainly, they deserve a great mourning, and they should have a great levaya. Nana Rabbi Kiva, whose last said, in the future day, when there's going to be this great war, and everybody is going to, certain people are going to die at the great war. I guess the great war of Gog and Magog. And so there's going to be a hesped, Yigdal Hamisped Yerushalayim. There'll be a hesped in Yerushalayim over those people who were lost at war. And Kemisbed, those people will get a hesped. Kemispad Hadrimim, like the great hesped of Hadrimim, Bebikas Megiddo, who died in the valley of Megiddo. That makes no sense. Who was this Hadrimim? There's nobody in Tanakh so that you can say that that future hesped is going to be like Hadrimim's hesped. There was nobody named Hadrimim. If we didn't have a translation of the Targum, this pasuk, I wouldn't understand it. But I'll explain it to you, says Rabbi Yosef. At that time, there'll be this hesped of Yerushalayim, I guess, for those that were lost. It will be a nice Veterans Day or something, but there'll be hesped in Yerushalayim to a Memorial Day. That hesped will be like the Achav, the wicked king of Achav bar Omri, the Ktal Yaseh bas Hadrimim bar Tavrimim. Achav was killed by Hadrimim bar Tavrimim, the king of Aram. And there we find this Achav, the wicked king, got this great levaya. Uchemispe, the hesped is going to be like Yoshiyahu bar Omoin. Yoshiyahu bar Omoin. The Ktal Yaseh Pare Chagira, the limping pharaoh, the biggest Megiddo. He was killed by the limping pharaoh and biggest Megiddo. So basically, what we're saying is that the Memorial Day, the day that there's going to be a memorial for those people that died during that great war in the future, they'll have a hesped for those people, like the great hesped of Achav and the great hesped of Yoshia bar Ammon. Achav was killed by Hadrimon, and Yoshiyahu was killed in a place called Mikas Megiddo. Same idea. The king Achav, the Jewish people, he was the wickedest king that we ever had. He only did one good thing. And the king stood his pose against Aram. He was shot, basically, during the war, but he didn't want to fall, because if he fell, people will see, oh, the king fell in war, let's run. So he kept his body up despite the pain and agony he was in, just to keep the morale of the people to continue to fight the war, and thereby he saved many people's life. So Achav got this great, did one good thing towards the end of his life. The the children of Yishmael certainly should get this great levaya. Amalei Rava Rabba Bamori. Rava said to Rabba Bamori, Ksiv maybe Tzidkiyahu. It says by Tzidkiyahu, B'Sholem Thomas. He's going to die peacefully. Uksiv, so dying peacefully, we imagine that Tzidkiyahu, who was the last king of the Jewish people, was taken as prisoner of war by Nebuchadnezzar, taken down to Bavel. The pasuk says they put him in prison. They blinded Tzidkiyahu. So they put him, they tortured him. So how could God say he's going to die peacefully? So the Gemara answers, Amalei, Hochi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. The answer is Shemeis Nebuchadnezzar b'yamav. He died. Nebuchadnezzar died in his lifetime, because when Nebuchadnezzar died, then they released Tzidkiyahu, and a day later he died. So again, despite all that, he lived an extra day than Nebuchadnezzar lived. Although the last days he lived in war. It's a remind me of those people who survived the war, the horrors of the war, but didn't live too much longer after the war. But they still lived out the Rishonim that perpetrated the war. The Amar Rava, the Rabba Bamori. Rava said to Rabba Bamori, Yashio, there was another king, a tzaddik. God says to him, basically, God told him, you're dying peacefully. But the pasuk says, how did Yashio HaMelech die? They shot King Yashiyahu and his his body looked like a sieve. In other words, like a sifter. He had so many holes in his body from being so shot at during the war. So how can you call him? That's called dying peacefully. So what does that mean? Yes, because the Beis Hamikdash was not destroyed in his lifetime. He was the king before Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, and yet, although he died in war by miscalculating his friendship with Paroi, therefore he died in war. But yet he outlived the Beis Hamikdash, was still stood after he passed on. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now the Gemara switches to what's the protocol when you visit somebody. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. You're not supposed to start talking until the oval speaks first. As you find in Eov, the first thing that Eov tried to understand, he opened his mouth first and talked about his tragedy, and then his friends started giving him the chama. And the idea of the Avel is we try to help the Avel to put things into perspective and to be matzdik all of us adin, to help see the justice in the act. Amar Ababo, Rabbo said, how do you know when you're having the Sudas Havra that the Avel sits at the head of the table? I'm not sure what the point is, but I guess the Avel feeling so low, we actually do things that make the Avel feel like he's the king. That you should sit at the head of the table. Again, in Eov, it says this pasuk, he's going to sit at the head of the table like a king, just like the Avelim there's like the Avelim being comforted by others. So the Gemara says you're trying to prove that the Avel sits at the head. But the pasuk seems to imply that the ones visiting the Aval, the comforters, they're the one that's supposed to sit at the head of the table. It's, if you read it, you could read it as Yinochem, because if it was referring to the people doing the comforting, the pasuk says say Minachem, those that doing the comforting. Since it's Yinochem, so let's read it again. The person who's an Aval will be sitting like a king, like an Aval sitting amongst the people who are comforting him. So that's the idea, that the Aval sits at the head of the table. So we say Besar, Mizrach, Besar means somebody becomes like a nobleman. Mirzach is an Aval who's bitter, and Zach not clear, right? He's bitter with agony. He becomes a nobleman, Lasaruchim, to other important people. So he's the head of important people. So the Aval sits at the head of the table. How do you know the Chosin sits at the head of the table? A Chosin is like a Kohen. Ma koyin b'reish, just like a koyin always sits at the head of the table. Av chosin b'reish, also chosin sits at the head of the table. The koyin gufe b'nalan. How do you know the koyin is supposed to sit at the head of the table? The Tana Rebbe Shmuel b'ki dashtoi. L'chol davar sheb'kedusha. Iftoyach rishon, levarach rishon, l'tamana rishon. We know a koyin sits at the head of the table because the pasuk says v'ki dashtoi. You have to show him ultimate respect. So the Gemara just said that a chassan who's the most feeling insecure and an aval who certainly feels very insecure, we dafke put them at the head of the table to help them out, and we bring psukim for that. Rab Chanina concludes, and now we end this Masechta Be'ez Hashem. The Gemara ends off Kasher Yitzias Neshamim Neguf. It's so difficult, leaving the soul, leaving the body. So let's see how difficult it is. Let's hold on. Just turn the page here. Okay, the body leaving the soul, leaving the body is a very difficult thing. Kitzipari, like a knotted rope, the fi veshet, leaving a thin hole. A knotted rope leaving a thin hole is you have to pull the rope very hard to get it out of the hole. Rabbi Yochanan kifitore befi vashet. Like the ropes that are in a wooden hole. Rashi, not here, but Rashi in Masechta Bracha said that there's a place in the world where you can't have boats with metal on it because there's a magnetic field in that part of the ocean, and therefore it would sink a ship if you bring it there. So they had to make special ships out of wood. Now, how do you make a ship out of wool without building it with any nails? The answer is you have these ropes that are tightly wedged into holes that join the planks together, and you could create a boat. Fascinating thing that Rashi discusses what seems to be a place on planet Earth that's similar to the Bermuda Triangle. Amar Rab Levi Bar Chayasa. Rab Levi Bar Chayasa says, Hanifta menames, when you say you depart from a dead person, lo yoima, you don't, apparently you could talk to the dead person, he still can hear you. Don't say lech l'shalom, go in peace. L'shalom, the word peace, probably you should interpret as your potential. So you tell him, don't go to your potential, lech b'shalom, go with your peace. In other words, go with your accomplishments of life that you live to your potential. Hanifta menachai, but when you depart from a live person, let's say you're both going on a trip and you're saying goodbye to each other, don't tell them lech bishalom with a base, go bishalom, elalech lishalom, go towards your peace. Because how do you know that? So hanifta menames lo yomaloi lech lishalom. When you say goodbye to a dead person, don't say the word lech lishalom. Ella, you should say lech bishalom. Shenema va'ato. God says to Avraham Avinu, you will come to your forefathers and die with peace. So we see the word bishalom refers to somebody dying. But hanifta berachai, when you say goodbye to somebody who's alive, lo yamaloi lech bishalom, don't say the word lech bishalom, and lech lishalom, go towards your peace. In other words, you're pursuing something. Because David HaMelech made a mistake. He made a faux pas. He said, David said to Avshalom, his son, Lech Bishalom. He told him, Lech Bishalom. And tragedy struck him, and he got hung by his hair. You have to learn the psukim in Tanakh to understand why. But basically, David HaMelech told him the wrong words, and then Avshalom, his son, was tragically taken away from him. Yisroi, Sha'ama LaMoshe, Yisroi said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech lishalom, go towards your peace. Halach, Moshe went, v'yitzliach, and was very successful. So you see, Lech lishalom, you have to be careful. I guess what the Gemara is saying, al tiftach peh l'satan, you have to think what comes out of your mouth. Sometimes you mean the right thing, but if you express yourself in the wrong way, bad things can happen from your mouth. So a person has to be so careful. Then finally, the Gemara, since the Gemara mentioned Rab Levi, the Gemara mentions two more things. Rab Levi. Someone leads a shul to go to a Beis HaMedrash, or Beis HaMedrash to Beis HaKnesses. So basically, he's learning with people, and then with a group, like we're learning, and then he goes to shul and davens with a minyan with a group. So if you do those two things, you'll constantly be around people. Zoicha, you'll merit in the future, Makabel, you're gonna greet Pnei Shechina, the face of the presence of Hashem. Shenema Yelchu Michael Elchoy. You go from one group to another group. The reward will be that you will see Yeroel Kimbetziyim. You'll have a much more feeling of the presence of God in the future. Amar Rab Chia Bar Ashi, Amar Rab Rav, Talmidei Chachamim Ein Lehem Menucha. A Talmid Chacham does not have rest, even in the future world. There's no such a thing of rest. You think you die, you're resting, because of what his accomplishments in this world, and people are learning his Torah. And not only Talmidei Chachamim, but anybody who supports Talmidei Chachamim, or anybody who supports Torah in their own way. So therefore, you get a chelik in what's going on in this world, as people are benefiting from the seeds that you planted, and they're eating from the fruits of the tree. So therefore, a Talmid Chacham has no rest. In the future world, Shenema, he's always moving. They will go from one place to another place, and they will see God in Siyum. So, Be'ez Hashem, Hadron Allah Ve'elu Megalchin, Uslik Allah, Mesechta Moed Katan. So, I hope somebody of our group will, first of all of you should take out a little wine to make your own Siyum, and somebody should say the Kaddish, if you make it to Shul tomorrow, to say the Kaddish. And Be'ez Hashem,
I will make the Siyum tomorrow, Mir Hashem. I'll do the Siyum.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Everybody should say the whole piece in the back. I have it here, but I don't want to take up time. But you say it to yourself today. I'll give you as the and also Mitzvah Hashem. Look forward to Mitzvah Hashem at the end of my Chagiga. We look forward to get together. I think we should get together. Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Okay, I get the Nacht. I get the Shabbos.
A gute Nacht, a guten Shabbos.
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 Baruch